Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to another Live at the Waterhole associated with African from Wild Earth. My name is Ben Coley, and I will be looking after you for the next couple of hours as we enjoy more incredible views from a variety of different cameras situated all across the African continent. We have got cameras in Zimbabwe, in South Africa, up in Kenya, and a variety of other locations. And it looks like today we have started out at Tau Game Lodge in Madikwe Game Reserve in the northwest of South Africa. 70,000 square 70,000 hectares. 70,000 square kilometers is a little excessive. 70,000 hectares of pristine wilderness, and the waterhole at Tau is one that gives us regular great sightings, particularly of some plains game, and as it is today, with some elephants. So it's great to spend the next couple of hours with you. As always, we'd love to hear from you. I would love to hear from you. Any of your questions, comments about what we're seeing, things about nature and ecologies that you'd like to know, please do send them in. You can do that via YouTube. You can register on our website and send me in any questions and anything you want to know about. But for now, let's enjoy this fabulous scene of what looks like at least 3 elephant bulls and a couple of groups of zebra enjoying the view up at Tau. So we've got a couple of well-wishings coming in. Thank you, Jan Mello, saying a good Wednesday and greeting us all. Yeah, let's go explore. Not a bad way to start, if you ask me. Hello, Darcy Miller, as well. And yes, Darcy Miller also would like to say hello to Leander, who is in my ear doing the directing in Johannesburg, making all of this possible, and very much looking forward to delivering some more great visuals to you all. Some very relaxed elephants, loving the way this one at the back is sitting there with his front leg cocked. You often see that with elephants, just resting that leg a little bit, taking so much weight. Every now and again, it's good to give it a rest. One of those little behavioural things is always good to note with elephants is you do sometimes see them lift up one of those front legs and just sort of dangle it backwards and forwards. And I've always considered that to be a sign that the elephant is thinking. You often see it after you've had a bit of an encounter with one, that he's maybe huffed and puffed a little bit, flapped his ears, turns around and starts walking off, and then stops, and then just raises one leg, and it just sort of drifts, almost wafts in the air. Always a sign for me that that elephant is considering his next move. Is he going to leave the area? Is he going to come back and posture a little bit more? There's always something I look for, just to be aware that that elephant may change his behaviour. But that was very much just a relaxation pose, I think. A little bit of elephant yoga. Tees McGargan, what can I find for you today? Well, I'm going to say elephants, zebras, and possibly a warthog or two, which I saw running around in the background. Beyond that, I have absolutely no idea. We will have to wait and see. That is the beauty of this, of course. We don't know what we're going to see, when we're going to see it, or what it's going to be doing. Speaking of unpredictable things, let's have a quick look at the weather at a variety of locations. As you can see, it's a nice balmy day across most of our locations. 30 degrees up there in Madikwe, very much the heat of the day, which is pretty good for this time of year. Temperatures, of course, beginning to cool off a little bit now that autumn is very much in effect. Winter on the way, of course, in the southern hemisphere. Still will mean warm days and definitely the opportunity to burn skin, which I know for a fact. But nights cooling down, so there's sort of 14, 15 degrees up in Madikwe, which is cool enough to warrant an extra jacket on an open safari vehicle. But this elephant in the foreground looks like he's having a whale of a time, cooling off in the mud. Hopefully he's not got stuck. That mud is always a lot thicker and more sticky than you might think. I think many of us guides have wandered into a mud wallow to go and look at something and lost a shoe in there or had to get pulled out. And unfortunately, sometimes animals do also succumb to that. I've seen various animals over the year trapped in drying up waterholes that have become particularly sort of muddy and quagmiry. Thankfully for the elephant, such as its strength, of course, it can just pull those legs out, but there'll be a lot of suction down there. I remember one waterhole in a reserve close to Hoedspruit that had dried up, and I think in the space of about a week we found quite a few antelopes and a couple of warthogs that had become stuck in there and had met their end, which was a real shame. But such is the need for water. They had to sort of traverse through this incredibly sort of, say, quagmire sort of area, and they just get stuck in there, and it's yeah, very unfortunate to watch. Beautiful scenes. Nice to see multiple mammal species together. These two elephant bulls just enjoying a nice quiet drink. See, the water is definitely lessening a little bit. The elephants being a little more careful with how much water that they spill. But as you can see, still plenty there up and down. And this is a pumped water hole, so this will support activity throughout the entire year. You can see the effort this big bull had to put into getting through the mud there. It's sad. It's a horrible way for those animals to go. We saw an Inyala that had got stuck in there once in some mud like that, and you have this horrible internal debate: should we let nature take its course? Should we help? And I have to say, on this particular occasion, I'm thinking of my tracker and I decided that we were going to help because this Inyalo looked like he was on his last legs, exposure, dehydration, exhaustion. So we did eventually sort of drag it out of the mud, just left it on the side of the waterhole there, hoping that it would recover in the shade. Went back again to check on it later that afternoon. Unfortunately, it had succumbed to the experience, but it is such a difficult decision as to whether to let nature take its course in a natural problem like that, which we probably should have done, but it's very, very hard to walk away sometimes. I think what was particularly amazing about that situation was that by the time we got back, which was probably 6 or 7 hours later, there was honestly not much left. The vultures had taken up residence around that waterhole as well, A, for water and bathing purposes, but also because a few other animals had succumbed there over the previous few days. And this entire Inyala, there was not much left of it just within a few hours. It's incredible how efficient nature's cleanup crew can be, even in those most unfortunate of circumstances. But no such problems here today. Three very, very happy elephants. Yeah, this has been a beautiful start to the afternoon, as often is at Tau, but we're going to head up to Kenya to Oldonyo and see what's happening up there. That's no fox. Always incredible the difference in the vegetation. You see the more equatorial areas, a lot more rain, and you can see the difference in the amount of vegetation and the greenery there. So it's one of those interesting theories you hear as a guide. I'm not going to say it's true or not, but one of the reasons why impalas are seen wagging those tails so much, yes, of course, it's from flies. But one of the things I once heard, which I rather like or not, I'm not sure, is that it does actually help to control the tick load of these animals. Impalas, as we can see there, with that one just leant around and ran her teeth very, very briefly through her fur. They do have specialized teeth slightly loose in their sockets with a sort of a comb type serrated edge specifically designed to remove small ticks from the fur, but there are areas that you can't reach, right at the back being one of them. And ticks do like, male chasing some females around, ticks do like to attach themselves in areas of softer skin where they are not in direct sunlight. So around the back part of the animal, in sort of the armpits, the thigh area, around the anus and the genital regions. And they've got those lovely little black stripes on their rumps. And so one of the theories is why you see impalas shaking their tails so often is that it does take a little bit of time. It takes a while for that prosnoma to that sort of specialized mouth part to attach to the skin. And by constantly wagging the tail, it acts a little bit like a brush and brushes those ticks. And then, being African sunlight and black absorbing heat, that black fur gets uncomfortably hot and forces the tick to move around onto the flanks of the animal where it is more easily groomed by the impala in question. So I'm not sure if there's been any official research done as to whether that is an actual mechanism, but nature doesn't do things for no reason. There must be a reason for those black lines. Some people might point to a following mechanism, but the white on the underside of the tail would also do that. So, an interesting idea. Whether it be true or not, I'm not 100% sure. Sandy Franklin, what is winter like in Africa? Well, it depends where you go. In the eastern side of South Africa, which is where I spend most of my time, it is normally cool in the evenings, down to single figures perhaps, but very, very unlikely to get frost on the sort of in the area around the Kruger National Park and surrounds. But during the evenings, it's a lot colder than you might think it would be. But during the day, still up into the mid 20s, and a very dry heat, because one of the other conditions we would associate with African winter is clear skies. We have an area of high pressure most of the country during winter, which stops clouds from forming because that's downward pressing air, so it stops water laden vapor rising up into the sky to condense to form clouds like we're seeing here. So conditions, often no rain for many months, although with global warming changes, we do get random storms in winter months now. But generally speaking, yeah, that's what I would expect. So warm conditions by sort of 9, 10 o'clock, very much t-shirt weather, but cools off quickly in the evenings. And as soon as the sun drops, there's a marked drop in temperature. The ambient air temperature is a lot lower, a lot less humidity. It's a tractor. Well, we don't need to see that. Let's go back over to the town. I think you may have heard some voices. Well, that's obviously the origin of the voices. There are occasionally guests around that waterhole, but evidently some reserve work that had to be done there. But let's rather look at these animals. So back to the winter question. However, little known, but we do even get snow in South Africa, particularly in the Free State areas. We can get a few inches of snow, very, very cold, minus temperatures. So in certain parts of the country, it can get icy, icy cold in winter. With the exception of Cape Town, which has almost a Mediterranean climate, so they tend to get their best weather around the coming months, sort of May, June, July, August, and not so nice for the rest of the year. No, whole space to walk past, and this one has to bump into the other one. A little bit of tactile communication. Goatee, would an elephant be able to mate with a mammoth? Um, I don't know. I suppose theoretically it could do. They do share an awful lot of similarities, common ancestor and all, from the Elephantidae group. Um, I don't know whether they would be able to mate, but they would share a similar reproductive system, certainly. One thing that does um, link them is their tusks. Of course, we all know the problems with elephant ivory and elephant poaching for the use of ivory within the various uses within the ivory trade. One of the recent sort of knock-on effects of global warming is what's been happening in the northern part of the world, in Siberia and surrounding areas. With the warmer temperatures, the permafrost has been melting, and various mammoth skeletons have been recovered. In fact, not just skeletons, because they've been preserved very well in the frozen earth. And a lot of those have sort of come to light recently, and mammoth tusk is very, very similar to elephant tusk and currently has no ban on it, whereas, of course, there is a ban on ivory trade in most countries, including some of the Asian countries. China, of course, put one in 2017. The UK was 2018, America 2016, I think. But there is no regulation on mammoth tusk. And it is very, very similar to elephant tusk in terms of its structure. And there is still a little bit of trade for mammoth tusks. And apparently recent news has suggested that, as usual, people are taking matters a little further than it should be. And people are sort of forcibly excavating mammoth carcasses and taking advantage of their tusks. Considering there's sort of 500,000 elephants in the world, when there are perhaps there is talk of there being millions of mammoth carcasses hidden in the permafrost. It still does drive an awful lot of interest, unfortunately. There are various tests that could be done to differentiate between elephant ivory and mammoth ivory, that being a lot of the problems that still some elephant ivory is going under the radar because it's considered to be mammoth ivory or is marketed as such. But one thing that all ivory or all elephant ivory has is a particular patterning. They are called lines of Schreeder, I think it is, or Schreeder. So I'm not quite sure how you pronounce it. But there's a particular pattern that only is found in elephant ivory, and it is slightly different. It's like a sort of a cross-hatching pattern, and there is a difference in the angles of those sort of corners of this cross-hatching between mammoth and elephant. But in order to do that, you have to have a pretty good sample, and it's more prominent towards the base of the tusk, and it's therefore very, very difficult for the authorities to test every single piece to see whether one is sort of masquerading as mammoth tusk when it should actually be an elephant tusk and therefore not allowed. But interesting to see that there are different ways to tell the differences between different tusks. Ivory is also present in warthog tusks, in hippo teeth, and also in sort of sperm whales, and all of them have their own unique design of these rings within the dentine, so they can be identified. It's such a shame that we are now, it seems, almost persecuting extinct animals, and there is a push to potentially even protect mammoths, sorry, to avoid this problem in the ivory trade. Salts of soil being deposited onto the back, all good sunblock. See, Joanne Mello, you're saying elephant bones must be really big and strong to carry that weight. Well, absolutely they are. If you've ever seen an elephant femur, for example, they are absolutely enormous. From one end to another, you're probably looking at a meter in size, if not a little bit more. And even just the diameter of those bones at their narrowest point must be about 4 or 5 inches. And then when you get up to the sort of the balls for the ball and socket joints, they can be huge and very, very heavy. They're very, very solid pieces of bone. Again, I would sort of estimate here, having picked up a few, but I think probably, not far off 20 kilograms or so for a big elephant femur. But when you've got to support 6 or 7 tons in an adult bull elephant, you would expect none the less, or nothing less. The animal bones are another thing that have been used as ivory substitutes over the years as well. There was a period where I remember reading that giraffe bones were being polished and passed off as ivory at one point. But again, because they lack those rings of Schrieger, they're relatively easy to identify as long as somebody has a close look at them under a microscope. You'll find sort of irregular shapes and little pits within bone, even if it has been polished. But giraffe bone, even with just a sort of a quick file off a multi-tool, you can see it does come up as very smooth and white. That's good to hear from you. That's all right. You're joining us a little bit late. And yeah, what a great way to start with some elephants. I'm sure we've got lots of other interesting sights to be seen. We've got some red-billed teals having a groom, all the sort of standard water birds that we often see here at Tau, blacksmith lapwings. I'm sure there'll be some blackwing stilts and spurwing and Egyptian geese. Always something to see. In fact, so much life going on there that we can't see all the insect life, all the aquatic life. You can still see some things buzzing around, be they dragonflies or lacewings, damselflies. Hard to see, but cameras can't get that close. But there is a plethora of life, these little oases. I think we're going to head over to Tembe Elephant Park now, where, by the sounds of it, ironically, we have got some more elephants. Many elephants. another group of all boys from what I can see at the moment. It's very normal to see these bachelor groups. Someone who's just being pushed off at the front by a younger male, assuming that is a male. We'll have to wait for clarification. But, yeah, looks like it. Unusual to see a youngster push off an older bull, although I have to say he doesn't look very big in comparison. And this one at the front is using his feet to just scrape up the dust and flick it onto himself. See one of Africa's palms there. My palm knowledge is a little bit rusty these days, but trying to remember which one those fan-like leaves are. If those are the Wow, I'm struggling. It's quite weird. You often remember the names of Latin names of trees, but actually forget the common names. Because back when I started studying to be a guide, that was the law. Common names of trees didn't really exist. Well, there's some nice tusks. And then Inyala. So the Phoenix reclinatra is the wild date palm, and there's a hyphae something as well, which I can't remember actually what the English name of it is. But the reason I bring that up is because we've had a bit of an ivory discussion, and so there's some spectacular ivory as well. You also do get vegetable ivory from some palms, particularly the ones in South America. So nothing to do with ivory itself, but look very, very similar to ivory and are polished and sold for sort of jewelry and adornments. But incredibly hard material. Vegetable ivory. But that is a beautiful set of tusks. Very even. Not as thick as perhaps I would have thought. But often when they grow to that length, not as thick as they could be. Very impressive. Joanne Miller, you're hoping to see a croc. Well, we often do at Tau. No sign of our croc today. Of course, those of you who watch regularly might have seen that when I was doing this last week, we did get to see a crocodile eating a snake in Tau Waterhole, which was a very, very unusual and interesting sighting. But plenty of time left for us to track down a crocodile for you. Jack 2 asking what are the main features of the seasons? Well, obviously, that's very dependent as to where you are within the continent or even just within South Africa. But generally speaking, in the eastern side of the country, it's more hotter, wetter, more sort of, I'd say tropical, it's sort of all subtropical, but more humid conditions. Very, very warm in the winter, in the summer months, up into the low to mid 40s. The hottest I've ever been in is 48 in the Lowveld. And warm evenings still can be high 20s, even low 30s, even throughout the night. So aircon is much appreciated in those conditions, unless you're staying in a tent or something, then it can be a little bit uncomfortable. And of course, we do generally get our rains during the summer months. And then, as we said earlier, much drier and cooler, particularly in the evenings during the winter. Thus, I agree, nothing better than to spend the day with elephants at Tembe. Always so interesting to watch. We also have sort of other months in the eastern side of South Africa that I would normally expect certain things. So August and October are often very, very windy months, or particularly August with the changing of seasons and the changing of pressures, that area of high pressure moving away a little bit, causing a pressure differential and a lot of air to rush in. We get berg winds as well, which are these very, very hot winds that come down off the escarpment, picking up temperature as they sort of come down the slope and then blowing across the eastern side of the country. And it's on a really bad day, it can honestly be akin to driving into a hairdryer. You almost struggle to breathe if you're driving into that breeze. It's very unpleasant, and a particular risk of fire because of the ambient air temperature during those times. It looks a nice little trip to Tembe, but it looks like things have quietened down a little bit at Old Donyo in terms of human activity and maybe being replaced by a very tall animal. Let's go have a look. A beautiful big old giraffe bull, checking out the surroundings, deciding if it's a good idea to come down for a drink. Look at that very, very pronounced calcium deposit on the forehead of this boy. Good sign of age. Body continuously producing calcium in giraffes, depositing it into the skull to make it a more effective weapon during those great necking contests that we sometimes see. So we have that big bump on the forehead, a couple of bumps above the eyes, and a couple at the back of the skull at the top of the neck as well. Lucky we might see the ripple of food come back up his throat. There it goes. As he ruminates away there. It always amazes me in draft that you can see that little bolus of chewed food being swallowed and regurgitated. A little ripple that goes up and down the throat. Very cool to see that digestive system in action. Good afternoon to Dark Main Lover as well. Glad you're enjoying the show and that you're enjoying learning and watching these beautiful animals. Well, that's what we're here for. Bring you these iconic creatures doing beautiful things in beautiful locations and hopefully sharing some interesting tidbits of information. Hopefully this boy will come and have a drink. Always entertaining and rather beautiful to watch a giraffe having a drink. And you always sort of feel sorry for him, the difficulties that he has to go through to quench his thirst with that incredibly long neck. Difficult when your face is so far away from the water, and quite the feat of yoga in order to get there. So very normal, typical behaviour of giraffes scanning, taking their time coming down to the water just to make sure it is safe to do so. Let's see if we get lucky. Oh, Dr. Lover, you're welcome. That's very kind of you to describe it as a beautiful greeting, but I'm glad you enjoyed it. It's so lovely to hear from everybody, all of you. Please do keep sending in your questions and comments. It's great to interact with you from all over the world. And so you often ask questions to which I don't know the answer to, and it gives me a good reason to go and do a little bit of research and learn new things about the animal kingdom. Nikita Hutt, thank you for the question. Do giraffes make a sound? Well, they're often considered to be silent animals, and I have to say, I personally have never heard a giraffe make a sound, but they do make sounds under extreme stress. They can sort of make almost like a grunty exhalation noise if they were under attack, for example, from a pride of lions. So it is a bit of a myth that they are completely mute, but they can make sound under extreme circumstances. Of course, youngsters also capable of vocalizing if and when they need to, with sort of bleats and mews and grunts and things. But yeah, not something that you hear very often. So also the benefits of me sitting here doing this is I can also check up on a few facts and things when you guys do ask me questions. And I see there was some research done in 2019 that suggests that at night time, giraffes do make a sort of a low frequency humming noise. No actual explanation yet as to what that's all about. Some theories suggest that it might be communicating with other members of the sort of very loose social group that may have got separated. Although giraffes not known for having a very, very strong social structure, and others suggesting it could even be almost like giraffe snoring or sleep talking. More interesting possibilities. So low frequency hums as well, apparently. Come on, boy. Are you going to have a drink? You're teasing us. Go on. Some lovely dark coloration that we can see on this giraffe bull, often characterized with older giraffes, which would make sense looking at those calcium deposits on his skull. Lots and lots of theories, of course, about the dark patches. One of the latest ones, of course, that have come out, and it's sort of been proved. It was actually on one of the David Attenborough mammals shows that was on a couple of weeks ago. In fact, it may have been last week, about the way that they help the giraffe to lose heat. So, under times when they do get very, very warm, the blood capillaries, the vessels underneath those black areas expand, and it's able to sort of lose heat, bleed heat out into out into the air. So one of the ways in which they cool down, also of course for a form of camouflage, but those dark patches often more prominent on older individuals due to a variety of reasons, things like a build-up of melanin throughout their lives in their skin, the equivalent almost of sun damage, same way those of us who spend a lot of time in very sunny areas can also develop darker pigments. So yeah, lots of ideas. But this boy is really teasing us here. Come on. Get a nice close up of his very, very tight skin around his legs as well, which of course is a nice adaptation to stop all of the blood from falling into the legs and giving him deep vein thrombosis, which would be unfortunate. Very elasticated blood vessels there as well to control the amount of blood flow. Ah, there we go. Oop, not sure. We discussed this last week, but the way that nuchal ligament along the back of the neck is stretching down when he reaches down to the water. One of the reasons that their head pops up is that ligament is suddenly released, and you get that beautiful sort of S shape of water that they often flick out. Great thing to look out for from a photography perspective. Hello, Mercedes Bean. Great to hear from you again. Ready for another day at the waterholes, indeed, and what a great day it's been so far. We've had zebras, elephants, adyalas, giraffes drinking. Spectacular. Yes, Lady Macbeth, you're also mentioning that mammals episode with the dark patches regulating heat. That's what popped into my mind. I've been thoroughly enjoying the mammals series. That, of course, is the one in the deserts and the hot environments. And I believe it was taken in the Hwanib Valley out in Namibia that they got that footage, where there have been some amazing footage in the past. They've shown footage filmed on the BBC before of two giraffes fighting and knocking each other out before in the Hwanib Valley. Actually caught up with the cold one yesterday because I missed that one. And a good friend of mine has actually produced and directed it. Used to be a guide over in South Africa. Used to be my head ranger at Sabi Sabi. Will Lawson, if you're watching, congratulations. Another fabulous episode. That does not look very comfortable though. Shame. Not quite sure what's happened there, but it does look a little bit sore and possibly infected. Shame, boy. Enough said. So animals are pretty good in terms of healing themselves, good level of antibodies. So we will hope that that will sort itself out in time. Mindy Tillipau, you are enjoying the giraffe drinking, one of your favourite things. It is such a unique, awkward grace, isn't it, to watch a giraffe drink? Tirana Erasmus, loving El Doño. And the camera angles, there have been some interesting ones. Oh, here comes another giraffe. Yeah, I love it. Love the giraffes against that open skyline. Well, that was very special, as it always is. Interesting to us checking out this other male coming in. Well, possibly a female, rather, looking at those tufty ossicones on the top of the head. Yeah, I think that is a female, and I think he is rather interested. That's a pretty interesting behaviour there. You can see the male sniffing and analysing the urine. Remember, in animals, there's an awful lot of hormonal information contained in there. We saw the male sort of peel back his lips there and do what we call a Flehmen grimace, accessing his vomeronasal organ of Jacobson, and analysing all the genetic information in there about her reproductive status and a variety of other things. I would say, looking at that, there's a good chance that that female giraffe is pregnant. She's looking a little bit rounded. See how interested the male is. I imagine he's probably got enough information to quell his appetite for now. Because, yeah, she very much looks pregnant to me. Possibly that's why she urinated and said, look, nothing to be done here. I see, Reader, you sent through a little comment about the way that giraffe is walking, how they normally walk with both left legs and both right legs, but this one did walk with alternating legs at one point. If he did, I didn't see that. But their natural rhythm, their natural gait is both legs on one side, as you can see him doing here. But I imagine maybe because he was turning a corner, perhaps, or some uneven ground, every now and again they may mix it up. But the standard gait of a giraffe is that rather unusual, both legs on one side at the same time. And Zoe Lansdowne, differences between male and female giraffes. Well, there are a few. The easiest thing to look at is there on the belly of this male giraffe. But if you can't see that level of detail, then we look at the heads and the height. Males generally taller than females, a little bit more strongly built. But it's particularly those what we call ossicones, those sort of horns on the top of the head, are the general giveaway. Males much thicker and usually characterized by a sort of a bald spot on the top, whereas the female's much thinner and with tufty hair as well, because they're not used for fighting in females. They've almost become sort of vestigial now. And the fact that males do bash each other by swinging their heads, they need to be a lot sturdier, a lot firmer, a lot thicker so that they don't get too damaged. So yeah, bald males and females have those little sort of paintbrushes. Mandy Tillipau asking about do giraffes use infrasound? Well, as we mentioned a little bit earlier, there's been some new research, I say new research, sort of 8, 9 years ago, that they use a very sort of low frequency humming during the night time that's been picked up. We don't really know what it's for yet, but I'm unaware of any infrasound, or I've never found anything about specific infrasound, that very low frequency sound that we know that elephants communicate by, which is inaudible to our ears. But I have absolutely no doubt that many of these animals are communicating in ways that we don't fully understand. The majority of animals do use scent as their primary communication method, as we saw just now, that very interesting behavior of the male analyzing that female's urine. And as I thought, he seems to have lost interest because, yeah, I'm pretty sure she's quite heavily pregnant. Pregnant for about 15 or 16 months if you're a giraffe. Sheila Patel from cloudy London. Well, that doesn't surprise me, unfortunately. I'm also broadcasting here from Dorset, so in the southwest of England, where it is also indeed rather cloudy. But isn't it great to listen to the sounds and watch the sights of the bush? Cassandra Neal, do they have long legs or long necks? The answer is yes, both. But I would say from a relativity point of view, it is very much the long neck which has well, which takes precedence. I suppose if you see them sort of belly height next to a horse, there's not a huge amount of difference. But from a neck length perspective, very much elongated, although still obviously with those 7 mammalian vertebrae in the neck, which we would expect. Why have they developed long necks? Well, of course, the general thought is that it enables them to feed in areas that other animals can't. But there is a slightly stronger school of scientific thought that it has developed as a form of sexual selection. Males with longer necks, more effective fighters, more momentum that can be generated to bash that big skull against your opponents, and therefore generally have better mating opportunities. And those long necked genetics are the ones that get passed on. Sandy Franklin, we love their long eyelashes. There is something very special about a giraffe's eyelashes, isn't it? They are quite beautiful because if they are adorned in mascara at all times, but hugely important. If you look at those trees in the background, those what used to be known as acacia trees, now Vachelias and Senegalias, those very, very thorny trees, defense mechanism that the tree has against browsing pressure. When you're sticking your head inside thorny trees all day, it's important to have eyelashes to protect your sensitive eyes. And not only that, of course, very dusty areas, some of these areas in Africa, as much help as you can get to keep your eyes clean is greatly appreciated. Sergio, you're asking about baby giraffes. Well, when they're born, they're amazingly, they're about 6 foot at birth. Once they've sort of unraveled, they come out as a bit of an origami style, and then their legs and their neck all sort of pop up and into place. So yeah, around about 6 foot squirrel. 6 foot at birth, but the most amazing thing is how quickly they grow. They grow on average. I'm trying to remember. They pretty much go from about 1.5 times in their first year. So they go from about 6 to about 9 foot in their first year. And they grow something crazy like half a centimeter a day for the first few months. It's ridiculous how quickly they grow. And no, they don't mate for life searcher either. They're very much opportunistic maters. They'll have different males mating with different females. Again, whoever is most dominant at the right time. But there are no pair bonds that we are aware of anyway in giraffe. We don't see particular males and females seeking one another out or staying together, as is the case with most mammals. Males show or have no parental care. With giraffes, it's a question of spreading one's genetics as far and as wide as possible, and leaving the females ready to look after everything. But there is doesn't seem to be any loyalty that we're aware of. So lots of questions coming in about giraffe, and I'm not surprised. They're such interesting, unique, weird animals, and they do have a lot of unusual features. Plus, you're asking, obviously, with regards to the communication thing. Here, asking about trees emitting signals. They do. It is a chemical signal again. If a tree feels that it is in danger or being heavily browsed upon, it will release a scent, a hormone into the air, a type of ethanol, I think it is. And that will be picked up in what are called the stomata, the underside of the leaves that are also used in gas exchanges by leaves, and that will cause trees downwind of the one being affected to actually start increasing more defensive chemicals like tannin, which will make the tree less palatable to any browsing animals. So one tree gets fed upon, releases, if you like, a distress signal picked up by others because it's carried on the wind, and they will preemptively make themselves taste more unpleasant because they have been informed that there is danger in the area. And if nothing transpires or that browser moves on very, very quickly, those signals diminish, and the tree will stop producing this tannin because that costs energy. So absolutely, trees do communicate with each other. There's also these ideas of these mycorrhizae, these fungal roots that are on the roots of many trees, all being interconnected in this great sort of fungal web beneath the ground, passing chemical and electrical signals, which is still a lot of that is being studied as we speak. So again, much more going on than we realize. John Mello, yes, they do have two toes. Whether they have a frog, I'm not 100% sure. Frog is something I associate with a zebra. It's that little triangle that you see at the back of their foot. But I imagine they have something similar, which is when they walk, it's the muscles pushing the blood back up the leg, so counteracting against gravity. Our sort of calf muscles do it for us when we walk. Our calves contract, that pushes blood back up the leg against gravity. But whether or not, I don't believe that giraffes have a frog as we would expect to see with zebras. But that was a very, very special little interaction that we saw there, some giraffes drinking. Let's head back over to Tower Lodge in Madikwe and see what's up there. So yes, Joanne, those two toes are what we call ungulates, so even-toed ungulates. So those two toes, which are almost walking on their tiptoes, which have sort of those toenails have fused to become hooves, like we expect with all sort of antelope animals. So enlarged nails, which act like hooves, continuously growing and are constantly worn down by movement as they're walking on those rough terrains. Also nice to see some zebras and more questions flooding in. Thanks so much for all of them today, everybody. Tony from Watford, um, referring to the stripes as to what their sort of purpose is, and that you've seen on the BBC that it's because of to potentially get rid of flies, biting flies. Yes, that is probably the most agreed upon theory at the moment. That there is this idea of black and white stripes is not pleasant for flies. It keeps flies away, um, and that has been proven. They've done various experiments with sort of things painted black, things painted white, things painted with black and white stripes. They've put them on horses and things to see a fly's reaction. And yes, it does seem that flies avoid those contrasts between black and white stripes. It seems what actually happens there is it messes with the fly's vision and actually sort of stops it being able to figure out depth from a landing perspective. And apparently, a lot of flies would fly towards these black and white stripes and just sort of fly into them and knock themselves out and fall on the ground because they couldn't really predict where to land, as it were. So it does seem very effective to try and control the number of flies. Of course, there are the theories of thermoregulation, camouflage, and everything else, but generally accepted, according to current theories at least, that it is more to do with controlling flies. Ants, sure, saying the crocodile or the elephants doesn't care about the crocodiles. Not really, ants, no, although there have been very rare occasions where a crocodile has jumped up and grabbed a trunk every now and again, but no, I don't think the elephant is too concerned, not like the other animals coming down for a drink. And Van Mello also commenting on the size difference between this is a good sized elephant bull, certainly, and those zebras. It's very, very difficult to put into perspective the size of an elephant until you have seen one in person, particularly on foot. You don't even get a full appreciation of it when you're sitting in a safari vehicle either. It's if you're ever on foot and have a close encounter with an elephant, it is, yeah, it's hard to explain. I always say it's like a two-story house standing in front of you. The easiest thing I can sort of try and equate it with is, and I show this to guests sometimes, that if you were standing right in front of an elephant and he had his head raised to try and intimidate you, the rifles that we carry, they're probably a metre and a half in length. I can hold that rifle by the butt and have it held high above my head, and it still wouldn't even touch its chin. Um, you've got to stand on a vehicle to even get close to its shoulder height. It is an absolutely enormous creature up close. Afternoon, Susie C. I'm glad you're enjoying the live at the Waterhole. Thanks again to Wild Earth and African for making it possible. I'm very, very glad to hear that you're learning new things. It's we can show you amazing pictures all the time, and it's my I'd say job. It's hardly a job, is it? But it's I find it a great opportunity to go and read up on things that I know I'm likely to see, and then I love sharing information with other people. So I'm glad you're learning stuff as well. I've always enjoyed that aspect of it, doing safaris and teaching people and seeing people's reactions when they learn something that they didn't already know or thought they knew about nature that was wrong, and the way in which everything interconnects and communicates with each other. And so I did 10 years of full-time guiding and about 5 years of guide training, and I've really enjoyed that. We have a captive group of people interested in that area who are like a sponge, hearing all of the interesting facts and things that we can give people and having conversations with them and throwing ideas around to explain unusual behavior. Always used to say that if you don't see something new every day, you simply didn't look hard enough. The elephant's missing the tip of his tail there. I saw a couple of zebras having a spat in the background. Very normal to see zebra stallions with no tail because they often bite it off. Obviously, you don't expect that with elephants. Not quite sure what would have happened to that poor elephant's tail. Possibly some form of infection. Lost a bit of blood supply to it. That does happen from time to time. But generally speaking, not the sort of thing you'd see with elephants biting each other's tails off. That elephant tail hair is amazing stuff as well. Incredibly thick and durable, jewelry and things made from it. Rather ethereal, isn't it? There, obviously, a gust of wind and all that white dust being blown across the plains there. The elephants in the mist. Amazing the body mechanics to carry that weight. So only one leg at a time off the ground. So an elephant cannot run. It basically power walks incredibly quickly. So even a charging elephant that can reach 40 kilometers an hour, so close to 30 miles an hour, is still basically only walking because it just
those bones that we were talking about earlier simply can't take the stress of running at that speed and not having 3 points of the structure on the ground at any one time. So even if you watch an elephant, what looks like running, it is still just power walking, but incredible that it all works. We've got some ground squirrels. I'm trying to work out what that was. It's a strange looking bird. But no, it's like a little ground squirrel. There's a couple of them there now. Funny little things. Digging for something and disappearing. They do live in subterranean burrows. Whether or not that was doing a little bit of maintenance to an entrance hole there, be damaged by that great elephant walking past their front door. Looks like we've got a yellow-billed duck over there and some little possibly Egyptian geese goslings. Are those or those little teals? No, I think those are teals. Looking at that black and white stripe along the side of the head, I think I see a red beak. A yellow-billed duck and a red-billed teal. Still no sign of our crocodile. I know a few of you were interested to see one of the crocs at Tau, which we often do see. Nothing yet. We will keep our eyes peeled. Good question, Serena. Difference between a ground squirrel and a tree squirrel. Um, Generally speaking, tree squirrels are a little bit grayer in appearance. Ground squirrels a little bit browner, probably to help them blend in with the general soil colour. And also tree squirrels are a little bit slighter, and also have a slightly longer tail, which just assists in balance whilst running around in the trees. Ground tails, a little bit shorter, stumpier tail. Obviously, live underground as opposed to in holes in trees. And so, my personal favourite thing about ground squirrels is the way that they use their big bushy tails as sort of umbrellas to help keep them out of the sun. I suppose that would be sort of as best I can come up with. Whether there's any sort of other specific differences, I'm not 100% sure. If anybody knows, by all means, let us know. But yeah, so a little bit slicer for tree squirrels, hole nesting in trees, all greyish in colour, with a slightly longer tail, not quite as bushy. Lovely to have these sort of occasional elephants just drifting past in the background. Very serene. Okay, that was another nice little visit to Tau, but let's head over to Naledi, to their waterhole, and see what's going on that side. Another elephant. So Oliphant's West Game Reserve, just north of Hoedspruit, still part of the Greater Kruger, but pretty much the far western boundary almost. But lovely to see yet another elephant, another bull. We haven't seen any little ones or any herds today, lots and lots of bulls. Thoroughly enjoying time in the mud. Lots of things being disturbed in that mud and it's around up there with the truck. I remember when Tessa and I wandered around in a mud hole a few months back, last year sometime, on Safari Live and Morning Safari. Found all sorts of things in there: water scorpions and freshwater crabs, freshwater mussels. So much going on below the surface that we don't normally see. I hope that's well made, that little structure there with the weight of that elephant's bottom. It's a good excuse to have a scratch. I've seen elephants make mincemeat of some human-made structures like that. I remember when I was working at eco training a little while ago, one of the neighbouring camps was having a problem that the elephant kept coming to them and sort of rip out the pipes around one of the outside taps. So one of the guys there spent the morning with some bricks and some concrete and made this little sort of structure to go around the tap to try and keep it safe. And I think the following day the elephant walked in, sort of walked up to the tap, sort of looked down at it and said, what is this strange thing? This wasn't here yesterday. And just gave it a little tap with his foot. The whole thing disintegrated. And the elephant proceeded to rip open the tap again to get to the water. So it was a nice try, but you could almost just see the ridiculousness of this elephant going, what? Really? Why have you bothered? Think with his toe, and that was that. Yeah, that was nice just to see our elephant have a bit of a mud play and a bit of a bum scratch. Let's go back up to Kenya and old Donyo, see if those giraffes are still around.
No dross, but a ground squirrel. So, with the question that was asked a little bit earlier, Serena, that's what a ground squirrel looks like. Yes, so you can see a little bit more brown than the classic tree squirrel that we see in South Africa, at least. Not really qualified to comment on other types of tree squirrels that you find on the continent. But this one a little bit browner in colour, not quite such a big bushy tail, almost more of a flattened tail, but incredibly cute nonetheless. Lovely sort of eyeshadow mascara that this one's got on as well. Lots of theories as to why animals have white around the eyes, potentially to reflect light into the retina to make them more effective at low light conditions. I think for me, it is more like makeup, draws attention to the eye. So if a predator was eyeing them up, the predator more likely to think that they've been seen because it makes the eye look bigger and very important in social exchanges as well. Oh, that's a little head. Well, that was very cute for a moment. It seems to have disappeared into that long grass. Perfect camouflage. Still see a bit of a head, that was about it. Right, well, say a nice but brief view of our ground squirrel there. Let's head back over to Oliphant's. This looks more like a breeding herd. We haven't seen a breeding herd of elephants yet along the Oliphant River. Beautiful river. Oh, look at that stunning waterbuck bull. Hello, boy. Look at those horns. One of the major rivers that runs right the way through the Kruger Park. Oliphants River, well worth a visit. Oliphants Camp in Kruger National Park itself, one of my favourite places, high up on the cliffs looking down over the river. So I was lucky enough to work in Oliphants West for a little part of my career as well. Saw the Oliphants come down in flood one year, which was mightily impressive and a bit scary. Wouldn't want to be too close to that. Great trees being carried down in the river. Very much one of the major arteries of southern South Africa. Lovely to see these elephants walking in a single file. Of course, that's the way we always walk in the bush. That's how animals generally move. Covers their numbers. When they're walking with purpose, they'll often walk in single file along game paths. Of course, a little bit more distraction with food and water so close by. But if you do see animals on the move, be it lions, zebras, elephants, generally single file, one behind the other. Another waterbuck in the background as well with that white ring. Cubus ellipsiprimnus, being their Latin name, ellipsiprimnus referring to that white circle on their bottoms. you wanted to know whether elephants get colds and have extra mucus. Whether or not it would be a cold in terms of a viral infection that we would consider it, that I wouldn't like to say for sure. But do they get occasionally snottier noses? Yes, they do. I've seen elephants with a little bit more nasal mucus than normal. I've been sneezed on by an elephant, been sprayed with elephant nasal mucus. Not very pleasant. But whether or not it's a common cold, as we would call it, I wouldn't have thought so. Possibly more likely some form of irritation of something in the nasal passages up against the membrane there that's causing more mucus. I'm playing with the viney things over there. And in terms of would it be a problem, I don't know. I imagine if it stayed there for a long time, it would be annoying. Um, but yeah, not 100% sure. But I've never heard of one getting a sort of a common cold, put it that way. Maybe that's what we would often think. But say whether it's a viral thing, I don't know. I'm afraid. Reader, how long can an elephant power walk for? Miles and miles and miles. If they need to, certain parts of Africa where it's very, very dry, they've been known to walk tens of miles, if not more than that in a day, hundreds of miles over the course of a few days to get from point A to point B if the matriarch realizing that a certain area is not living up to expectations. Her memory will know of different areas, maybe where there's permanent water sources, natural springs, better feeding, and they can travel immense distances, hundreds of miles. There have been various reports of collared elephants within the Kruger that are seen in South Africa, and then they go up into Zimbabwe, and then down into Mozambique, and then back into Kruger, doing these enormous loops. So they can, if required, travel huge distances. Searcher wanting to know what causes rips in elephant ears. Um, Again, possibly many things, but in my experience, it normally happens when they're younger, before the skin is really toughened up. Remember that skin in the ear is incredibly thin, and when they are young, it's a little bit less sturdy. And I would imagine that most of those rips and tears happen on sharp pieces of vegetation, broken sticks, whilst feeding or moving quickly through the bushes, running away from something, running towards something, and they get torn by broken branches. That would be my theory. And then obviously it doesn't heal, but it is a very, very good ID feature. Many elephants are identified with little rips and nicks and holes and things in their ears. But I imagine it's probably caused by many different ways that we can't think of as well. Just one of those things where you've got thin skin on the ears and you're constantly flapping them around. Sometimes you see them with holes through their ears, like almost like a bullet hole. It isn't a bullet hole, but it does look as if they've had a piercing. Again, I would imagine that's from a branch that's gone straight through it. This little quest these elephants are on seems to have stalled under what looks like a nice big sycamore fig tree. Enjoying a little bit of shade, a bit of thicker vegetation. Everything's slowed down a bit. We can go down to some proper feeding now. And down. Let's see what this other youngster's going to play. Cool. Big effort to get back to his feet. but you'll often see them if they do lie down, they'll lie down on the slope to facilitate a slightly less strenuous getting up process. Beautiful scenes though. Always worth scanning those sorts of bushes. If you're ever sitting along a river's edge like this, that's exactly where you might find a lion or a leopard or something just lying up in the shade. Oh, straggler. Likely a young bull. Doing that teenage thing. Don't want to walk with the rest of my family. I'm sure I'll hang around close enough that Mum can do my washing and cook me food when I want it, but far enough away to not be directly associated with them. It'll be that slow process of male elephants becoming more independent. Very normal to find young bulls trailing the rest of the herd. So just starting that independence takes a few years normally. It's a slow process. It's not a just leave home one day. It's just become more and more aloof, spend more and more time away from the herd until such time as those apron strings are cut. But he won't get lost, and so with that incredibly sensitive sense of smell, be able to follow the path of the rest of the herd. But it sounds like very much an elephant day. We're going to head over to Rosie's pan, where hopefully we might see an elephant in the water. Spraying mud everywhere, really, aren't you, boy? A lot of mud, cool water being flicked up behind the ears just to help with that cooling system. Giant radiators. Silhouette. You can see some of the light reflecting off the mud and the way it's dancing across the water. It's also nice, you can see all those tactile hairs, whiskers on the lower lip, The elephant, of course, remember an elephant can't see its mouth. So when it is picking up food and placing it in the mouth, it is very important to be able to feel what you're doing there, and they will be used regularly just to help guide everything into the right place. It's excellent spatial awareness, but every little helps. Every elephant has a silver lining, and so it seems. Sure, that was. You can see he was maybe being distracted by something there. You could just see the way he was sort of playing with the water and poking the trunk around, not really achieving very much, and then a little head flap. I wonder if maybe there's another animal somewhere approaching that was just distracting him a little bit. It looks like time to have a drink and then maybe time to move on. Maybe he knew his timeshare was up. He was a bit irritated about that. It is interesting to try and work out what's going through their brain. Could have been a strange scent on the air, possibly one of those low frequency rumbles from another member of his group that he was just passing on communication, realised he was getting left behind. Who knows? But pretty much changed his behaviour now. It looks as if just sort of standing and listening, figuring something out. It's cool to hear the noise of the skin on skin there. It looks like he's got Wellington boots on. So when you're asking why do elephants sort of sometimes go still like that? Well, so we never really know. May just be having a rest. They do sleep standing up, but in my opinion, it's he's listening, analysing, listening to infrasound signals that are being sent. So they remember they can hear much lower um, frequencies at lower hertz than we can. I think often there are these messages being sent through the airwaves, seismic messages through the ground, and they're picking them up and analysing them and just having a good listen. That's my opinion.
good scratch of his face by the look of it. Again, another good reason why they've got long eyelashes. Elephants also have long, beautiful eyelashes. If you're ever lucky enough to see an elephant close up, they have such beautiful eyes. You really feel as if you can feel an elephant by looking into his eyes. You can sense the knowledge and the intelligence. Must protect them at all times with the dust, throwing dust and mud in your face all the time, sticking a head in trees. Their eyelashes that are probably a good couple of inches long. Yeah, that was a nice little cameo from the elephant, but let's change it up a little bit. We're going to head down to the Western Cape and to Stony Point to see what's happening down by the ocean. So for your close-up, Mr. Hyrax, how sweet are these things? I do like a Hyrax or a Dassie. What a view. It's something I realised you used to find next to the ocean so often. Obviously, we've got a nice colony of them down there in the rocks. I always thought with their difficulty of controlling their temperature, being a long coastal area with all those winds, can't be very easy. So I've found the perfect spot with chin rest. Nice little scratch, I'd say. Sunbathing, probably the Dassie's most famous pastime. They can spend up to about 80% of their days just lying out in the sun. And at night time, when they sleep, they generally all sleep together, huddled together to try and conserve body heat. Interesting, they struggle so much with thermoregulation in comparison to a lot of other mammalian ancestors. Quite sure why. But social life, very, very important to Dassies. And someone on their back, struggling to see it there, but you can often see a sort of a darker patch. They have what's called a dorsal gland, which they rub on each other, and it just gives out that scent to keep all the family together. Very, very important
bonds between them, but they can live in big groups, up to 50 plus sometimes. These are little stumpy toenails, so one of the reasons again they're associated with elephants. There used to be all sorts of different sizes and shapes of things within this family, and so there are various theories that they gave rise to lots of other families that we consider a bit more normal now, like the manatees, the dugongs, and of course the elephants. Let's have a look again if he has another scratch, he or she. That on their back foot they have one longer claw or long nail. There is a grooming claw, which they'll often use for scratching and trying to remove things that get stuck into their fur. Oh. You see in a lot of other animals as well, and even birds as well. Things like nightjars, it's got a petulant claw that they use for grooming purposes. They're little rotund things, but they've got quite the spring on them. Again, very much adapted for hopping around on those rocks. There are lots of sweat glands on their feet, just to give them a little bit of extra traction. And the way their foot is designed, almost looking as if they're walking on the soles of their feet with raised soles, if you like, just to act like a little bit of a suction cup. Big stretch from our cormorants. All look to be white-bellied cormorants, certainly two adults on the left, and possibly some slightly less mature ones on the right. Of course, cormorants are well known for their diving abilities. They can go down as deep as sort of 20 meters, if not more, hold their breath for up to a minute, which is pretty for a bird. Expert fishers and have been used by people to help with fishing over the years. It's not a particularly nice practice, but there are stories, and it's still, I'm going to say not stories, it's fact, but where cormorants were basically kept on leads with collars on, which allowed them to eat smaller fish, but really big fish couldn't pass through that thing around their neck, and they would dive down and grab fish, and then when they came back, those fish would be stored in the gullet and forced to regurgitate. It was a sort of an ancient way of fishing practiced by people. Proudly I say, we're back to our hyraxes as to whether they have fights or if they're pretty docile. I've never seen them having a fuffle or a bit of a scrap between them, but there is a territorial male, and so during the breeding season he will defend his interests certainly. So I believe they do sometimes fight, but I have never witnessed it myself. I don't know how vicious it actually gets, but they've got sharp teeth. I imagine there's a lot of nipping that goes on, but yeah, not something that I've ever witnessed. We are nearly out of time, unfortunately, which is a bit of a shame. It's been another fantastic afternoon of excitement at our various locations. Only a couple of minutes left now, but lots and lots of elephants. I love seeing the ground squirrels, giraffes drinking again. I've been blessed with that a few times over the last couple of weeks. But yeah, it's been another great day, and thanks to everybody for all of your questions. Lots and lots coming through today, which has made my life a lot easier. I hope you don't mind all the chit chat in the background, but I do love answering these questions as they come in. And this is a good time for me to remind you that as from tomorrow, we do have a few time changes. So, live at Waterhole tomorrow will be half an hour earlier. Instead of 1 till 3 Central African time, it's going to be 12:30 till 2:30 Central African time. That will be followed by On Safari from 2:30 until 3, and then the Sunset Safari will be from 3 o'clock until 6 o'clock. And that is just to combat the slightly differing length of days as we're coming into winter. It's getting darker earlier, so we're just moving everything slightly earlier to accommodate that, so we can still bring you amazing pictures and stories from across Africa. But we are within the last minute of the show now, so again, huge thanks to everybody who's joined us. I hope you've enjoyed it as much as I have. I will see you tomorrow, and we will see you. Well, I won't see you. You will hear me tomorrow, and we will see what else we can find. But for the last 30 seconds or so, we'll enjoy these beautiful hyraxes. What a stunning profile portrait picture. It's a Facebook picture for Dusty if ever I've seen one. But have a wonderful rest of your days. Enjoy everything else coming your way, and I will see you half an hour earlier tomorrow.
Hello and welcome everyone. It is so good to have you with us. This is the show where we look at the most recent highlights from our sunset and sunrise